The Zerga Heptateuch, Part 3, The Web of Arc, a forensic audit of the industrial complexes and the matrix of demonized capitalism, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Fact that Everything is a Scam introduction. The forensic audit begins. I am initiating a forensic audit of the environment outside my house, and what I am discovering is that the domestic gulag was not a standalone operation. It was, in fact, a meticulously managed franchise location. My father was not the CEO of some quaint mom-and-pop torture chamber. He was middle management in a vast multinational corporation of soul-crushing that has been operating with ruthless efficiency since the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, and possibly since the moment Cain looked at Abel's offering and decided his own was pathetically inadequate. For 40 years I operated under a profoundly false premise. I looked at my father, the warden, the narcissist, the Teflon Don of the La-Z-Boy recliner, and I asked with the desperation of a child, why is he like this? I treated him as a biological anomaly, a glitch in the human code, a factory defect that somehow slipped past quality control, a cosmic typo. But as I widen the lens, engaging what I have termed Logic Gate 3, the conclusion undergoes a seismic shift. He was not an anomaly, he was a product. He was Employee of the Month in a civilization specifically designed to mass-produce sociopaths, and the award came with a cheap plaque, a designated parking space, and the systematic wholesale destruction of his firstborn son's psychological infrastructure. My family unit did not operate on the software of Christianity, despite the Sunday morning cosplay routine, where we would dutifully dress up like the cast of a particularly bad sitcom and pretend we did not actively hate one another. We had the superficial appearance of the Cleavers, but the functional dynamics of the Mansons. Underneath the polyester shirts and the cloying scent of aqua velva, we were running on a completely different operating system. Demonized capitalism, a tripartite plague of corporatism, consumerism, and materialism, the unholy trinity that had replaced Father and Holy Spirit with profit, product, and planned obsolescence. We were a Stepford family. If you had poked us with a sharp object, we would not have bled. We would have leaked hydraulic fluid and expired coupons for things nobody needs. To understand the specific abuse of the Son, one must first understand the architecture of the asylum that built the Father. The domestic gulag was merely a cell block. The warden was taking his orders from a much higher, more impersonal administration, an administration that has been in power for so long, it has successfully convinced us all that this is simply how things are, a fundamental law of the universe like gravity or death, or the infuriating fact that hot dogs come in packs of 10 while buns come in packs of 8 because the universe is fundamentally hostile to human happiness. The rod is fractal, which is a fancy way of saying it is the same pattern repeating at every level of magnification, like a Russian nesting doll made entirely of turds. What happens at the dinner table is happening in the boardroom, the Senate floor, and the pulpit. It is the same script, just with better lighting and a craft services table. And I'm going to prove it, wielding the greatest minds philosophy and sociology have ever offered. Because if I am going to prosecute an entire civilization, I am bringing receipts from Kant, Marx Foucault, and George Carlin, the four horsemen. I told you so. This will be a utilitarian analysis, which means I will be asking the most important question philosophy can possibly ask. Does this system maximize human flourishing, or does it maximize human suffering, while putting on a masterful performance of doing the opposite? Spoiler alert, it is the second one. The system is a liar, a thief, and a murderer, and it has been getting away with it for centuries because it owns the police, the courts, and the very dictionary that defines what crime means. But I am the witness who survived, and I am taking the stand. 1. The economic psychopathy. Or where's my trickle? We must first clear the table of the foundational lie regarding our survival, and that lie is this. We live under the capitalism of Adam Smith and the wealth of nations. Now, Adam Smith, nice chap, Scottish, wore a lot of lace, probably had significant trouble with buttons. He wrote about moral sentiments and fair exchange and the invisible hand of the market guiding resources to their most efficient and beneficial use. If Adam Smith walked into a modern Walmart, he would have a stroke on the spot. He would look at the buzzing fluorescent lights, the people fighting over a discount toaster, the workers who cannot afford to shop at the very store they work at, and he would say, I say, is this the invisible hand? Because it looks more like an invisible foot kicking the poor in the knackers, whilst the rich fellow on the hill counts his money and laughs. What we actually live under is what I am calling predatory corporatocracy, and it fits the diagnostic criteria for Logic Gate 1 perfectly. It is a rigged casino where the house does not just win. The house owns the players, the cards, the chips, the very oxygen you are breathing while you lose, and the ambulance that takes you away when you have a heart attack from the stress. and then they send your family a bill for the ambulance ride. Let me introduce you to the con game that defined my father's generation and destroyed mine. Supply side economics, also known as trickle down, also known as voodoo economics. My father worshipped Ronald Reagan. He had a framed picture of Reagan next to a picture of the Pope. I think he genuinely believed they were some kind of crime fighting duo. Ronald and the Pontiff, Sundays at 9. This week, they fight inflation by punching a welfare mother. The theory, such as it is, goes like this. If you give all the money to the rich guy on top of the hill, the job creator, the wealth generator, the guy who definitely earned his money through hard work and not through inheritance, exploitation, and tax loopholes. You could drive a yacht through if you give him enough champagne. Eventually, he will have to relieve himself. And that warm golden stream flowing down the hill, that is for you, that is your share. That is the trickle and trickle down. Congratulations, you are getting pissed on and being told it is rain. And if you complain, they call you a socialist. George Carlin saw this con immediate. He said, it's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. And he was right, but let me add the philosophical framework that explains why it is a con. Karl Marx, another guy with a great beard, questionable personal hygiene, but brilliant economic analysis, identified the fundamental contradiction of capitalism. The people who own the means of production extract surplus value from the people who do the actual work. The worker produces $100 of value. The owner pays him $20 and keeps $80. That $80 is profit, and profit is just a fancy word for theft that has been legalized. Now, Marx thought this would lead to revolution, but what actually happened is much more insidious. The system figured out how to make the workers defend their own exploitation. They convinced us that the billionaire is a hero, the union is a villain, and if you are poor, it is because you did not work hard enough, even though the billionaire's grandfather stole the land from the Indians, and his father bribed the politicians, and he himself has not done an honest day's work in his entire life. This is what Gramsci called hegemony. The ruling class does not just control the economy, they control the story we tell about the economy, so we cannot even imagine an alternative. And here is where the utilitarian analysis comes in. John Stuart Mill said the goal of society should be the greatest happiness for the greatest number. So let us do the math. Trickle down economics. Does it maximize happiness? Let us see. The top 1% own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. CEO pay has increased 940% since 1978, while worker pay has increased a paltry 12%. The minimum wage, adjusted for inflation, is lower now than it was in 1968. Medical bankruptcy is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy. Student loan debt is a staggering $1.7 trillion. The average American is one medical emergency away from homelessness. Does this maximize happiness for the greatest number? No. It fails the utilitarian test so spectacularly that if this were a student's paper, I would give it an F and recommend intensive therapy. Logic Gate 2 flags this system immediately. The corporations do not trickle it down. They hoard it. They stash it in the Cayman Islands. They buy back their own stock to artificially inflate share prices. They act exactly like the narcissist father who demands all the oxygen in the room and then screams at you for breathing too loud. Stop inhaling my air, you dummy. I need that for my portfolio. And when you point out that this is insane, that an economy where the workers cannot afford to buy the products they make is a death spiral, they call you a communist and tell you to move to Venezuela. But here is the thing. I am not a communist. I am a utilitarian. I do not care about ideology. I care about outcomes. And the outcome of this system is mass suffering, ecological collapse, and the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few hundred people who have more money than they could spend in 1,000 lifetimes while children go hungry. That is not capitalism. That is feudalism with better PR. 2. The theological economics. The vine versus the vampire. Jesus Christ, great guy, fantastic beard, questionable carpentry skills, but an absolute genius when it came to understanding human nature, gave us the economic model of the kingdom in the parable of the vine. He said, I am the vine, you are the branches. The logic is simple. It is agricultural. Even a turnip understands it. If you want the branch to grow grapes, the vine has to send it juice. You gotta water the roots. You gotta mulch. It is a reciprocal relationship. But the modern industrial complex, they operate on the logic of the tapeworm. They extract the sap, but they refuse to water the vine. They look at a dried up, withered branch and scream, produce more grapes, you lazy twig. Why are you so brittle? Have you tried mindfulness? Maybe you need a yoga class. This creates the oxymoron of the consumer. This is where the Zucker, Abrahams, and Zucker logic kicks in. It is like airplane. The cockpit is empty. The autopilot is an inflatable doll that is slowly deflating. and the passengers are being told to buy duty-free perfume while the plane is nosediving into a volcano. The corporations want me to be a good consumer. They spend billions telling me I need a new phone, a new car, a new face, a new life. But here is the punchline, folks, the cosmic joke that isn't funny. How can I buy your crap if you don't pay me? It is absurd. It is the definition of insanity. It is like a vampire sucking all your blood and then asking if you want to donate to the Red Cross. Come on, give a pint. Don't be stingy. Think of the children. I can't, Dracula. I'm anemic. I'm passing out. It is an Ouroboros, a snake eating its own tail, convinced it is having a delicious linguine dinner. The corporation, this legal fiction we have granted personhood, acts exactly like the narcissist father. It demands total loyalty. It demands you wear the uniform, sing the company song, and give the best years of your life to the mission. And what do you get in return? Stagnant wages. A 401k that dissolves when the market sneezes. And the moment you are broken, the moment the stress of their demands gives you a heart attack or a breakdown, they replace you before your body is cold. They treat you like a used tissue, useful for wiping up a mess, then discarded without a second thought. My father never understood this. He believed in loyalty. He believed that if he gave the company everything, the company would take care of him. He was like a battered wife who keeps going back to her husband because he's really a good man when he's not drinking. But the corporation is always drinking. It is drunk on profit, and it will beat you black and blue and then tell you it was your fault for making it angry. 3. The banking industrial complex. The money changers in the temple. If the economic system is the disease, the banking industrial complex is the delivery mechanism, the syringe that injects the poison directly into the bloodstream of society. Jesus Christ himself, the guy who preached love and forgiveness and turning the other cheek, the guy who washed the feet of lepers and dined with prostitutes, that guy walked into the temple and started flipping tables and whipping money changers. It is the only time in the Gospels where Jesus gets violent, not when they arrested him, not when they beat him, not when they nailed him to a cross. But when he saw the money changers in the temple, turning the house of prayer into a den of thieves, he lost his divine composure and went full WE on their asses. And do you know why? Because he understood something that we have forgotten. The financialization of everything is the corruption of everything. When money becomes the measure of all value, human beings become commodities, and the temple becomes a marketplace. The modern banking system operates on a principle so audacious, so brazen, that when you first hear it, you think it must be a joke. It is called fractional reserve banking, and it works like this. When you deposit $100 in your bank account, the bank does not keep that $100 in a vault with your name on it. No, the bank keeps maybe $10, the reserve, and loans out the other $90 to someone else. But here is the magic trick. Your account still shows $100, and the person who borrowed the $90 now has $90 in their account. So now there is $190 in the system, even though only $100 actually exists. And then that person deposits their $90, and the bank keeps $9 and loans out $81. And on it goes, creating money out of thin air, money that does not exist, backed by nothing, conjured from the void like a wizard casting a spell. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is how the system actually works. It is taught in every economics class. It is the foundation of modern finance. And it is a Ponzi scheme that makes Bernie Madoff look like a pickpocket. But wait, it gets better. Not only do the banks create money from nothing, they then charge you interest on that imaginary money. You want to buy a house. The bank creates the money for your mortgage out of thin air, gives it to the seller, and then you spend the next 30 years paying back that imaginary money plus interest. And if you cannot pay, they take your house, your real physical house, as collateral for money that never existed in the first place. It is the greatest magic trick in history. It is alchemy in reverse. They turn nothing into gold, and then they take your gold when you cannot pay for the nothing. And if anyone else tried this, they would be arrested for counterfeiting. But when the banks do it, they call it sound monetary policy and give the executives bonuses. And let us talk about the Federal Reserve. It is neither federal, nor does it have any reserves. It is about as federal as Federal Express. It is a private corporation run by bankers for the benefit of bankers. It manipulates the money supply to protect the assets of the rich while inflating away the savings of the poor. It creates boom and bust cycles that allow the wealthy to buy up assets for pennies on the dollar while the working class loses their homes. Logic Gate 1 is flashing red. This is a system devoid of empathy, devoid of morality, operating purely on the logic of extraction. It is a parasite that has convinced the host that it is an organ. My father, the innocent dupe, trusted the banks. He trusted the financial advisors. He trusted the system. When they told him to refinance, he did. When they told him to invest, he did. And when the crash came in 2008, when the house of cards collapsed, he blamed himself. He thought he was stupid. He thought he had failed. He did not realize he was playing a game that was rigged from the start. He was sitting at a poker table where the dealer was looking at his cards, marking the deck, and stealing chips from his pile when he wasn't looking, and then blaming him for losing. 4. The psychiatric industrial complex. Doctor, doctor, give me the news. The sociopathic logic bleeds into what I am calling the web of industrial complexes, and the first stop on this tour of hell, after the bank robbed you, is the psychiatric industrial complex. When the economic machine grinds your soul into hamburger meat, when the alienation and exploitation and meaninglessness of modern life breaks you down, where do they send you? To the repair shop, the psychiatrist, to the therapist, to the guy with the notepad and the prescription pad and the complete inability to ask the one question that matters: is the problem you, or is the problem the world you are living in? Now I have got nothing against science. I like gravity. Gravity works. It is reliable. You drop something, it falls. Beautiful, consistent. But psychiatry, that is a soft science. That is science with a beanbag chair and a guessing game. That is science that cannot decide if homosexuality is a disease, or if being sad after your father tells you to jump when you are trying to hang yourself is a chemical imbalance that requires 40 years of medication. I believe the roots of this tree are poison, and Logic Gate 3 is flashing red like a disco ball at a funeral. The origins of modern psychiatry are uncomfortably tangled with the methodologies of control eugenics, and yes, the Nazis. The goal was never healing in the spiritual sense. The goal was management. The goal was to weed out the defectives or medicate them into compliance, to make them functional enough to work, but not awake enough to question, to turn them into docile, productive, obedient citizens who do not make trouble, do not ask questions, do not rock the boat. Let me be very clear about what I am saying here, because this is not hyperbole. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented historical fact that has been conveniently memory holed by the psychiatric establishment. The Nazi regime did not invent eugenics. That dubious honor goes to the British and Americans, but they perfected it, and they did so with the enthusiastic collaboration of the psychiatric profession. The T4 program, named after the address Tiergartenstrasse 4 in Berlin, was the Nazi euthanasia program that murdered over 300,000 people deemed life unworthy of life. The mentally ill, the physically disabled, the chronically sick, the useless eaters, who consumed resources without producing value, and who decided who lived and who died. Psychiatrists, doctors, the experts. They filled out forms, they made diagnoses, they signed death warrants, and they did it all in the name of science and public health and racial hygiene. This was not a fringe operation run by a few rogue sadists. This was mainstream psychiatry. This was the profession acting in accordance with its own logic, its own values, its own understanding of what it meant to help society. And after the war, after Nuremberg, after the world recoiled in horror at what had been done, what happened to these psychiatrists? Were they hanged? Were they imprisoned? Were they stripped of their licenses and cast out of the profession in disgrace? No, most of them went right back to work. They changed their letterhead. They updated their terminology. They swapped racial hygiene for mental hygiene, and they continued doing what they had always done, deciding who was fit and who was defective, who deserved treatment and who deserved elimination, who was human and who was merely a problem to be solved. And the Americans, the British, the Soviets, they did not reject this logic. They imported it. They brought Nazi scientists to America under Operation Paperclip. They studied their methods. They adopted their techniques, and they built the modern psychiatric pharmaceutical complex on the foundation of Nazi eugenics. This is not ancient history. This is living memory. There are people alive today who were sterilized against their will by psychiatrists who believed they were doing the right thing, who believed they were improving the gene pool, who believed they were serving the greater good. The last forced sterilization in the United States happened in the 1980s. The 1980s, that is not the Dark Ages, that is the era of MTV and personal computers and my childhood. Michel Foucault, the French philosopher who spent his career documenting the mechanisms of power and control, understood this better than anyone. In Madness and Civilization and Discipline and Punish, he showed how the psychiatric system is not primarily about healing. It is about normalization. It is about taking people who deviate from the norm, whether that deviation is political, sexual, behavioral, or simply inconvenient, and either forcing them back into conformity or removing them from society entirely. Foucault called this biopower, the power to manage populations, to control bodies, to decide who lives and who dies, who is sane and who is mad, who is productive and who is a burden. And the genius of biopower is that it does not look like power. It looks like care. It looks like medicine. It looks like helping. The psychiatrist is not a jailer. He is a healer. The mental hospital is not a prison. It is a sanctuary. The medication is not a chemical lobotomy. It is treatment. But the effect is the same: compliance, docility, the elimination of resistance. And here is where it gets personal, because I was not just a witness to this system. I was a victim of it. When I was 13 years old, after my father told me to jump, after I survived my suicide attempt, I was brought to a psychiatrist. His name was Dr. Barry Holzer, and he worked at Schneider Children's Hospital, and I sat in his office, a broken child, a traumatized child, a child who had just been told by his own father that he should die, and I waited for wisdom. I waited for someone to ask the right questions. I waited for someone to see the monster in my house and do something about it. And what did Dr. Holzer ask me? What was the burning question that this trained professional, this expert in child psychology, this man who had spent years studying the human mind, what did he need to know? How often do you masturbate? Logic Gate 5 is screaming. This is not medicine. This is not healing. This is the Freudian hangover, the obsession with the mechanical functioning of the organism, rather than the existential scream of the soul. It is obscene. It is a violation. And I answered him because I was a child and I trusted adults, and I thought he knew what he was doing, and he wrote it down in his little notebook like it was important information, like it was a clue, like Sherlock Holmes discovering the crucial piece of evidence that would solve the case. And then he prescribed Pamela, and then Prozac, and for the next 17 years I could not get an erection. 17 years, from age 13 to age 30. The entire span of my sexual development, the years when I should have been learning about intimacy and connection and pleasure, the years when I should have been figuring out who I was as a sexual being. I was chemically castrated by a drug that was supposed to help me. Nobody told me this would happen. Nobody warned me. Nobody asked if I was willing to trade my sexuality for a reduction in suicidal thoughts. They just prescribed the pills and sent me on my way. And when I complained about the side effects, they told me it was a small price to pay for being stable, as if stability without vitality is a life worth living, as if being a eunuch is preferable to being depressed. This is what Ivan Illich called iatrogenic illness, illness caused by the medical system itself. The cure is worse than the disease. The treatment creates new problems that require new treatments, and on it goes, a perpetual motion machine of suffering and profit. And the pharmaceutical companies love it, because a patient cured is a customer lost, but a patient managed with chronic medication is a revenue stream for life. They do not want to heal you. They want to subscribe you. They want you dependent, compliant, and just functional enough to keep working, keep buying, but not awake enough to ask why you are so miserable in the first place. And my father, he loved the diagnosis. He loved the pills. Why? Because if I had a chemical imbalance, then he was not the problem. It was not his abuse, it was my biology. It was not his cruelty, it was my serotonin. The diagnosis absolved him of all sin. It was the perfect alibi for a narcissist. The psychiatric complex gave him a get out of jail free card, and he played it every single day for the rest of his life. 5. The medical industrial complex. The subscription model for your body. If the psychiatric complex manages your mind, the medical industrial complex manages your body, and it does so with the same logic: not to heal, to extract. The United States spends more on health care per capita than any other country in the world, and yet we have worse health outcomes than most developed nations. We have the highest rates of chronic disease, obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and mental illness. Why? Because there is no money in prevention. There is no profit in wellness. A patient cured is a customer lost. A patient managed with chronic medication is a revenue stream for life. Let me tell you about the opioid epidemic, because this is where the mask slips completely, where the pretense of care dissolves and you see the naked face of corporate psychopathy. Purdue Pharma, owned by the Sackler family, developed OxyContin in the 1990s. It was marketed as a safe painkiller, a miracle drug that would relieve suffering without the risk of addiction. This was a lie. They knew it was a lie. Internal documents, revealed in lawsuits and investigations, show that Purdue executives knew OxyContin was highly addictive, knew that people were dying, knew that doctors were overprescribing it, and they did not care. They did not care because the profits were astronomical. OxyContin generated over $35 billion in revenue for Purdue Pharma. $35 billion. That is more than the GDP of some countries. And how did they do it? They bribed doctors. They flew them to luxury resorts for conferences. that were really just golf trips with a PowerPoint presentation in the middle. They gave them free samples to hand out like candy. They hired an army of sales reps, attractive, persuasive people who were trained to downplay the risks and upsell the benefits, and they sent them into doctors' offices with quotas and bonuses tied to how many prescriptions they could generate. They targeted vulnerable communities, poor, rural, working class areas where people were in pain, where jobs were scarce, where hope was thin, and they flooded those communities with pills. Towns in West Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, places that were already struggling, were suddenly drowning in opioids. Pharmacies in towns of 3,000 people were dispensing millions of pills a year. Millions. The math does not work unless you understand that the pills were not being used. They were being abused, sold, traded, and the people taking them were not patients. They were addicts. And the result, over 500,000 Americans have died from opioid overdoses since 1999. 500,000. That is more than the number of Americans who died in World War II. That is a genocide. That is a Holocaust. And it was not an accident. It was not a mistake. It was a business plan. It was a calculated decision by executives in boardrooms who looked at the data, saw the deaths, and decided that the profits were worth it. They did a cost-benefit analysis, and they decided that killing 500,000 people was an acceptable price to pay for $35 billion in revenue. And when the truth came out, when the lawsuits started, when the bodies piled up so high that even the most corrupt politicians could not ignore it anymore, what happened? Did the Sacklers go to prison? Did they lose their fortune? Did they face any real consequences? No. Purdue Pharma declared bankruptcy, which is a legal maneuver that allows a corporation to shield its assets while screwing its creditors. The Sacklers paid a fine, a few $1 billion, which sounds like a lot until you realize they made $35 billion and they get to keep most of it, and they walked away. They are still billionaires. They still have their mansions, their yachts, their art collections. They still have their names on museum wings and university buildings. They are still respected members of high society. And the victims, the families of the dead, they got a settlement that works out to about $3,000 per death. $3,000. That is what an American life is worth in the eyes of the system. That is the price of a used car. This is not capitalism. This is not the free market. This is a protection racket. This is the mafia and lab coats. And the government, the FDA, the DEA, the politicians who are supposed to protect us, they were complicit. The FDA approved OxyContin based on studies funded by Purdue Pharma. The DEA looked the other way while pharmacies dispensed millions of pills. Politicians took campaign donations from the Sacklers and voted against regulations that might have saved lives. The system is not broken. The system is working exactly as designed. It is designed to extract maximum profit from human suffering, and it is designed to protect the people doing the extracting while punishing the people being extracted. The insurance industrial complex is the bouncer at the door who decides if you are cool enough to get the drugs. The insurance industry monetizes risk. They bet against your health. The entire business model is based on collecting premiums and denying claims. Every claim they deny is profit. Every patient they frustrate into giving up is profit. They have entire departments dedicated to finding reasons to say no. Prior authorization, step therapy, formulary restrictions, network limitations. It is designed to be confusing, designed to be exhausting, designed to make you give up. I have spent hours on the phone with these people. I have been transferred from department to department, listening to smooth jazz while my life hangs in the balance. I have been told that a procedure was not medically necessary by a bureaucrat who thinks a stethoscope is a type of telescope. The United States is the only developed country in the world where people go bankrupt because they get sick, where GoFundMe has become the largest health insurer in the nation. We have replaced a functioning healthcare system with digital begging. 6. The Pharisaical machine, the church of the 501c3. And where is the refuge? Where is the sanctuary? Where is the institution that is supposed to stand against the principalities and powers? The church, the house of God. Except what I found, there was not sanctuary. I found another franchise in the web of archons. The modern American church has remade Jesus in its own image, and the result is what I call Republican Jesus. The Jesus in the Bible. Sandals, long hair, hangs out with prostitutes and fishermen, probably smells like low tide, preaches love and forgiveness, gives away free health care, tells rich people to give away their money, flips over tables in the temple, gets executed by the state for sedition. Republican Jesus, wears a suit, loves tax cuts, carries an M16, hates the poor, thinks healthcare is socialism, loves the free market, supports the troops, votes Republican, and would definitely call the cops on the real Jesus for loitering. But let me explain what is happening here using Jean Baudrillard's concept, the simulacrum. Baudrillard argued that in postmodern society, we have moved beyond representation into simulation. We create copies that have no original, images that refer only to other images, a hyperreality that is more real than reality itself. The megachurch is a perfect example of this. It is not a church in the traditional sense, a community of believers gathering to worship God, to serve the poor, to challenge injustice. It is a simulation of a church, a hyperreal church, a church that is more church-like than an actual church. It has all the signifiers of church, the cross, the music, the preaching, the Bible verses, but it is empty of actual content. It is a brand, it is a franchise. It is Christianity, brought to you by the same people who brought you McDonald's and Starbucks. You can go to a megachurch in Texas or California or Florida, and it will be exactly the same music, the same message, the same coffee, the same bookstore selling the same books. It is not a spiritual experience. It is a consumer experience. You are not encountering God. You are encountering a carefully crafted product designed to make you feel good and keep you coming back, and most importantly, keep you giving money. The worship service is a performance, carefully choreographed and produced. The pastor is a motivational speaker, not a prophet. The congregation is an audience, not a community. And God is a product, a brand, a lifestyle choice. You do not encounter God in the megachurch. You consume God. You buy the books, the CDs, the t-shirts, the coffee mugs. You attend the conferences, the retreats, the small groups. You participate in the simulation, and the simulation feels real, more real than real faith, because real faith is messy and difficult and demands sacrifice, while simulated faith is comfortable and easy and demands only your money, and the message is always the same. God wants you to be successful. God wants you to be happy. God wants you to be rich. Just have faith, give generously, and God will bless you. This is the prosperity gospel, and it is the ultimate heresy, the complete inversion of everything Jesus taught. Jesus said, "Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom of God." The prosperity gospel says, "Blessed are the rich, for they have God's favor." Jesus said, "It is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God." The prosperity gospel says, God wants you to be rich, and if you are not rich, it is because you do not have enough faith. Jesus said, "You cannot serve both God and money." The prosperity gospel says, God and money are best friends, and if you serve God, He will give you money. Let me tell you about the preachers who peddle this poison. Joel Osteen, who lives in a $10.5 million mansion and whose church took in $89 million in 2017 alone. Kenneth Copeland, who has a net worth of $300 million and owns multiple private jets because, as he explained in an interview, commercial planes are full of demons. Creflo Dollar, yes, that is his real name, because subtlety is dead, who asked his congregation to buy him a $65 million private jet and was shocked when people called him out for it. These are not shepherds, these are wolves. These are not servants of God, these are servants of mammon. And the fact that they can do this openly, that they can fleece their flocks without consequence, that they can live in obscene luxury while their congregants struggle to pay rent, tells you everything you need to know about the state of the American church. And here is where the 501c3 deal comes in. In 1954, Congress passed the Johnson Amendment, which prohibits tax-exempt organizations, including churches, from endorsing or opposing political candidates. Sounds reasonable, right? Separation of church and state and all that. Except what it actually does is prevent churches from speaking prophetically about power. They cannot call out corrupt politicians. They cannot organize politically. They cannot challenge the system. If they do, they risk losing their tax-exempt status, which would be financially devastating. So they stay silent. They preach smooth things. They focus on personal morality. Do not have sex before marriage. Do not do drugs. Do not swear, while ignoring systemic injustice, poverty, war, exploitation, environmental destruction. They tell you to be a good person while the world burns, and they call that Christianity. My father loves this version of Christianity. It validated his narcissism. It told him his modest success, the Toyota Celica, the house, was proof of God's favor. And it allowed him to look at my suffering, my depression, my struggle, and see it as proof of my spiritual failure. It was not that he was an abusive father. It was that I was a faithless son. The theology gave him the perfect alibi. 7. The political media complex, manufacturing consent, and division. The three primary complexes we have audited, economic, medical, psychiatric, do not operate in a vacuum. They are the gears of the machine, but they are not the steering wheel. To understand who is driving this bus off the cliff, we must examine the control matrix, the political and media industrial complexes. George Carlin, looking down from the heavens with a cigarette and a scowl, laid this bare decades ago. They don't want you thinking. They want you obedient. They want you just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you, sooner or later, because they own this fucking place. It's a big club and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. This system works by turning us against each other. It gives us culture wars to fight so we do not fight class wars. They dangle wedge issues, abortion, guns, bathrooms, flags, like shiny keys in front of a baby. Look at the keys, get angry at the keys. Meanwhile, they are stealing the baby's wallet, the baby's future, and the baby's planet. They tell conservatives that liberals are the enemy. They tell liberals that conservatives are the enemy. The truth, the enemy is the guy in the private jet laughing at both of you. This is not a new strategy. The Roman emperors used bread and circuses to keep the masses distracted while they looted the treasury. The British used divide and conquer tactics to control their colonies, turning ethnic and religious groups against each other, so they would not unite against the empire. The American ruling class has perfected this art. They have turned politics into professional wrestling, a scripted performance where the outcomes are predetermined, but the audience is convinced it is real and their participation matters. The two-party system is the ultimate illusion of choice. Republicans are the party of big business, war, and Wall Street. Democrats are the party of big business, war, and Wall Street. They agree on the fundamentals. The archons stay in power, the money flows up, the bombs keep falling, the people keep struggling. Only thing they disagree on is the marketing. It is like being allowed to choose the color of your prison cell, but not whether you are in prison. You can vote for the red team or the blue team, but both teams are owned by the same billionaires, funded by the same corporations, and serving the same interests. And the media industrial complex is the megaphone for this distraction. 6 corporations control 90% of what Americans see and read. 6. Comcast, Disney, Atan, Paramount, Sony, and Fox. These corporations have interests, tax cuts, deregulation, war, and those interests shape the news. You will never see a mainstream news segment that honestly analyzes the crimes of capitalism, because capitalism pays the electric bill for the news station. You will never see a serious discussion of wealth inequality, because the people who own the news are the people who benefit from wealth inequality. You will never see a call for revolution, because the people who control the narrative are the people who would lose everything in a revolution. Instead, you get spectacle, you get outrage, you get manufactured controversy designed to keep you watching, keep you clicking, keep you engaged, but never informed, never empowered, never organized. They give you Trump versus Biden, red versus blue, left versus right, and they tell you this is the most important election of your lifetime, and you have to vote, and your vote matters, and if you do not vote, you are a bad citizen. But they never tell you that both candidates are bought and paid for, that both parties serve the same masters, that the system is rigged and your vote is a placebo designed to make you feel like you have power when you have none. My father is a perfect product of this system. He watches Fox News and Newsmax like it is the gospel. He soaks up the outrage. He was angry at immigrants who never took his job. He was angry at welfare queens who barely exist. He was angry at liberals who were proposing policies that might have actually saved his pension. He is a useful idiot for the ruling class. He fights their battles for them. He defended the banks that foreclosed on him. He defended the corporations that underpaid him. He defended the politicians who cut his benefits. He was a turkey voting for Thanksgiving because the farmer told him the chickens were the real problem. And when I tried to explain this to him, when I tried to show him that he was being manipulated, that his anger was being weaponized against his own interests, he called me a communist. He called me ungrateful. He called me a traitor because the system had done its job. It had turned him against his own son, against his own class, against his own future. It had convinced him that the people trying to help him were his enemies, and the people robbing him were his friends. That is the genius of the system. That is the perfection of the con. 9. The Archontic synthesis, the Gnostic framework. When you step back and see the entire web, the suicidal logic becomes chillingly clear. The economic complex impoverishes you. The medical complex profits from your sickness. The psychiatric complex profits from your despair. The political complex gives the entire process a veneer of legitimacy. The media complex convinces you it is all normal, and the religious complex tells you it is God's will. These complexes are not working against each other. They are working in perfect, terrifying harmony. They are a single, multi-headed beast. The goal is not to create a world of prosperous, healthy, free individuals. The goal is to create a global population of sick, indebted, distracted, and spiritually compliant serfs who can be easily managed and endlessly exploited. The Gnostics, those ancient heretics who saw through the simulacrum of their own time, warned us about this. In texts like the Hypostasis of the Archons, they described a group of cosmic rulers who created the material world not as a garden, but as a prison farm for souls. They feed on our pain, our fear, and our confusion. The chief Archon Yaldabaoth is a mocking caricature of the authoritarian god my father worships. He is arrogant, ignorant of his own origins, and believes himself to be the only god who exists. He screams, "I am God and there is no other," because he is terrified of the competition. He is the original narcissist. My father is an avatar of this archontic consciousness. When he looked at me hanging from that rope and said, "Jump," it was not just a bad father speaking. It was the voice of the system. It was the voice of a world that views human life as a commodity to be used up and discarded. He was channeling the logic of the bank that forecloses on the widow, the insurance company that denies the cancer treatment, and the general who orders the drone strike. He was the local franchise manager of the cosmic gulag. 10. Conclusion. The glitch in the matrix and the path of resist. So what do? How do we fight a system that owns the police, the courts, the banks, and the gods? We do not storm the gates. The Archons are too powerful for a frontal assault. They want us to fight them on their terms, with violence and anger, because those are energies they can feed on. No, the answer is to become a glitch. The answer is to refuse to play the game. Step 1. See through the lies. You have to put on the glasses. You have to see that the bank is a parasite, the church is a corporation, and your father is a sociopath. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. This act of seeing is revolutionary. This is what the Gnostics called gnosis, direct knowledge of the truth that bypasses the official narrative. The system depends on your ignorance. It depends on you believing the lie. The moment you stop believing, the moment you see them behind the curtain, the spell is broken. Step 2. Withdraw your consent. The system works because we agree to it. We agree to work meaningless jobs. We agree to buy shit we do not need. We agree to take the pills. We can say no. We can opt out. It will cost you. You will lose status. You will be called crazy. But your soul will be your own. This is what Thoreau called civil disobedience, the refusal to participate in systems that violate your conscience. This is what Gandhi called non-cooperation, the withdrawal of consent from an unjust system. The system cannot function without your participation. Every person who opts out weakens the machine. Step 3. Create alternatives. The system lies and says there is no alternative, but there is always an alternative. Create a community garden instead of a supermarket. Create a credit union instead of a bank. Create a house church instead of a megachurch. Create a chosen family instead of staying in the abusive one. Build the new world in the shell of the old. This is what the anarchists call prefigurative politics. Creating the world you want to live in right now. Not waiting for permission. Not waiting for the revolution. Just building it. One relationship at a time. One community at a time. One act of mutual aid at a time. Step 4. Testify. The system depends on silence. It depends on you thinking you are alone. So speak, tell your story, write the manifesto, shout it from the rooftops. Your testimony is the weapon. The truth is like water. It finds the cracks and erodes the foundation. This is what the prophets did. This is what the dissidents do. This is what the survivors do. We tell the truth, and the truth sets us free, and the truth sets others free. And eventually there are so many of us telling the truth that the lie cannot hold. Step 5. Heal. Not the fake healing of the repair shop. Real healing. The kind that happens when you stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What happened to me?" The kind that happens when you realize your depression was a rational response to an insane world. The kind that happens when you realize you are not broken. You were just in a cage. This is what trauma-informed therapy does. This is what community does. This is what love does. We heal each other by witnessing each other, by holding space for each other's pain, by refusing to pathologize suffering, and instead honoring it as the appropriate response to injustice. And here is the hope, the real hope, not the false hope of the system that tells you to buy a lottery ticket and pray harder. This is already happening. All over the world, people are waking up. They are putting on the glasses. They are seeing the aliens. They are becoming glitches in the matrix. In Detroit, people are turning abandoned lots into urban farms. In Spain, workers are taking over bankrupt factories and running them as cooperatives. In Latin America, indigenous communities are reclaiming their land and their traditions. In America, young people are rejecting the script. They are not buying houses they cannot afford. They are not having children they cannot support. They are not working themselves to death for corporations that do not care if they live or die. They are opting out. They are building alternatives. They are creating the world they want to live in. The archons are scared. They can feel the ground shifting. They are doubling down on the lies, increasing the propaganda, tightening the control. But it is too late. The cat is out of the bag. The truth is out. And once the truth is out, it cannot be put back in. The system is dying. It is eating itself. It is collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. And we are the ones who are going to build what comes next. The verdict, this is my testimony. This is my prosecution. This is my declaration of independence from the systems that tried to kill me and failed. They failed because I am still here. They failed because I am still speaking. If you are reading this and you recognize yourself in this story, if you have felt the same pain, seen the same lies, fought the same battles, then you are a glitch too. You are awake in a world of sleepwalkers. You are sane in an insane asylum. You are human in a world of zombies. That is not a curse. That is a gift. That is a calling. You are not alone. There are millions of us, and we are going to win, not because we are richer or stronger, but because we are telling the truth, and the truth is more powerful than any lie. Zerga out. The audit is complete. The verdict is in. The system is guilty. And the sentence is this: we are done playing your game. We are done pretending. We are done being good little consumers and quiet little victims and fake little Christians. We are taking off the masks. We are putting on the glasses. We are seeing the truth. And we are telling everyone who will listen, the kingdom of God is within you. The power is within you. No system can take that away. Now go forth and be a glitch in their matrix. Be the person they cannot control, cannot predict, cannot commodify. Be human, be real, be free. And when they ask you why you are not playing along anymore, tell them Zerga sent you.